Let's have a conversation about obsession as it relates to men who obsess over each other. Hi, my name is Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed therapist. I think a lot of times when we talk about obsession, and when we talk about stalking and things like that, a lot of times we think of the traditional a man who stalks a woman or a woman who stalks another a man or something like that. We typically think of it in terms of heteronormative relationships. However, it certainly does happen in men, in both gay men and men who are heterosexual presenting. In fact, I think for me as a clinician who's been working with people who are predatory over the years or who have predatory behaviors, I've actually seen it more in heterosexual men, men who are heterosexual presenting. And one of the obsession is basically, this ruminative thoughts process, and where you're constantly thinking, you may be desiring a person, and it's super intrusive, where that person is all that you can really think about, or you're hyper focused on, you're hyper vigilant about it. You're looking up to see what they're doing. You're checking their social media. You might be riding by their house. That's how they used to do it back in the old school days before social media. You may have a tracker, but the thinking can go into the stalking piece, right? So I'm getting more into the stalking piece, but the ruminative thinking certainly gets into it, where all you can think about is that person, what they're doing, who they're with, seeing red if they're with somebody besides you, and coveting even that person, who or what they have, or their lifestyle. I definitely have seen this a lot more with heterosexual men. This happens a lot in prison. So much so that a lot of the work that I used to work on with inmates is redirection, and redirecting, refocusing, reframing, and getting out of that. Medications can certainly help with that. But some of this stuff could really lead to, dangerous, it typically tends to escalate, and it can go unnoticed because people are so sly in trying to cover it up. But men do men do obsess and ruminate over other men, what you're doing, what you're wearing, and things like that. And some of the tell signs that you can tell that a man, if you're a heterosexual man, and you have friends, and maybe one's kind of weird, one that's sort of clinging on, one that wants to copy you and dress like you, one that always wants to know what you're doing, who you're going with, and how long you're going to be gone. People who maybe want to borrow stuff of yours. And while that may sound weird, it's so that they can have a possession of yours, a keepsake, if you will. So I think a good example of somebody who did this out in the free world is, and I think he did an excellent job of this, but he was very sly, is Matt Damon in the movie The Talented Mr. Ripley, where he was obsessed with Jude Law's character. He was kind of like a tag along, and he sort of inserted himself, and he basically wanted to take over Jude Law's life. He did not like the fact that Jude Law had a fiance. He sort of monitored and surveilled him, but so there was a bit of stalking that went into that too, because Jude Law had all these other people that he was seeing, and so he did not like it when oh gosh, I can't remember what his name was, but Jude Law had this friend this other friend, and this other friend picked up on him right away, and he was like, "You're a loser. You need to get your own life and stop, like, following him around like a puppy dog. Like, find something safe to do." And so that was like a thorn in Matt Damon's side, and Matt Damon was determined to win Jude Law at all costs. And if he couldn't have him, then nobody could have him. But even then, he was just sort of walking around in his clothes and his stuff, and just was like obsessed over the next moment that they would have with each other. So that's and I think he did a very skilled job at that, the talented Mr. Ripley, because at first he seemed so benign, and then he over time started to show how much of a chameleon he could be, and he really was kind of like a sleuth and went undetected. And even towards the end, I think Gwyneth Paltrow caught on to him, but nobody believed her because other men were just like, "Yep, this is what." Her fiance was just kind of like this dude, and we don't suspect that there was any foul play or anything like that. And that's a perfect example on how, not all men can pick up on what's going on. And sometimes you can't even pick up on it. You just notice that there's like a weird change in behavior. There's like a clinging on. And sometimes there may be a random outburst of anger and rage where they kind of want to fight you and you don't know what's happening. It's because they've been perseverating on things that you've been doing, and it's making them angry that they're not involved, or they feel like they should be involved, or they feel like they should be the one that you're doing it with, or even that it should be them. But so there's this obsessive rumination. There's other examples of this sort of happening, this kind of stuff happening in the prison system. I mean, Oz, for example, is a good show. 60 Days In. Yeah, I mean, you pick any jail show, you can kind of see it. There was one, oh gosh, I can't even remember. But there's also been like reality shows of men behind bars sort of obsessing over relationships. And I forget, I don't know if it was like Scared Straight, or there's something where it's like, they have prison wives. So for anybody out there, and an obsessive person can change obsessions. So a lot of times people think because, hey, someone goes to jail or they get, sent away to a hospital, something like that, that, okay, they're all good now, they're behind bars and that kind of stuff goes away. I'm here to tell you, no, it doesn't. They may still obsess over you if you were their target, but they also choose new targets, and that can be incredibly scary. And I can't tell you how intimidating that becomes in jail, where you see people who actually, I'm going to carry it out. Like I'm thinking these, because obsession can go straight to violence straight away. And I can't tell you how many people I've had to talk to and reprimand for putting their hands on someone when they cannot control their obsessions and things like that, and their targeting behaviors. And sometimes they can even, in jail, they can collude others, they can bring in other people to join in with their thinking, right? So and people can be very masterful and manipulative that way, and they can convince other people that there's some wrongdoing being done there, or something's happening, and all it takes is one, and then especially if they're an OG, if they've been down a long time and they know everybody, it's kind of like what they say can go sometimes, and before you know it, you've got a mess on your hands. But this could happen. This also happens in gangs and things like that before people even get to jail, because I've worked with those folks as well. But it happens all the time. So that's something to be on the lookout for. So let me know your thoughts about this. Like, comment, share, and follow. Thank you so much. Take care. Until next time.